Well, good morning and welcome to this fireside chat with Dr. Lawrence Jones. Um, and also, as we were commenting privately, happy Mardi Gras to our dear friends in the city of New Orleans. My name's Clint Vince, and I chair the U.S. energy practice of the Dentons law firm, and I also co-chair our global transportation and infrastructure sector. And together with my teammate Emma Hand, we co-chair this think tank. I do have one important announcement before we get underway, and that is we have decided to rename our think tank. Um, we founded the Smart Cities and Connected Communities think tank nearly a decade ago, and we have grown to more than 850 thought leaders in nearly 90 countries. And our proposal is our mission has always been to modernize infrastructure in cities and communities around the world. And we defined infrastructure as digital, physical, and social infrastructure. So everything from technology to policy development, which often lags uh, technological development. We decided to conform the name of our think tank to our mission, and so we simply will be named the Dentons Infrastructure Think Tank going forward. And we're going to broaden our scope to cover not just cities and communities, which will remain vitally important to us, but also to include state, federal, and global um, organizations as well. And that makes it particularly timely that we are going to do this fireside chat today with um, Dr. Lawrence Jones, a great internationalist and a great um, uh, person who is concerned with the modernization of infrastructure. Dr. Jones is the president of the newly formed Energy Plexus Institute. And we're also delighted to once again be co-hosting this fireside chat, with the Keystone Policy Center as part of their Key Conversations program. And I'm going to ask the amazing CEO of Keystone, Christine Scanlon, to give us a warm introduction.
Well, thank you, Clint. And as always, it's such an honor to be a part of these conversations with Dentons. They're inspiring, and the folks that you get to have dialogue with, it's just an encyclopedia of knowledge and information. And I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation today with Dr. Jones, who is inspiring. And I've had the honor of being a part of an audience with Dr. Jones before, and the intelligence, wit, and thought-provoking conversation we'll have today, I'm really looking forward to. Unfortunately, as Clint knows, I won't be able to stay to the end. I'm in Denver, but I have to get up to Keystone. But Dr. Jones, I'm going to try and keep you on my phone driving the highway. So I so appreciate you joining with us today, and really look forward to what comes next. So thank you, Clint.
Thank you, Christine. And we understand you're going to have to um, get back to Keystone with your policy center, but we really appreciate you being with us this morning. Lawrence Jones is a very special man and a very special friend. He was born in Monrovia, Liberia, and he received his master's and doctorate degrees in electrical engineering from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden. So Lawrence has always been an internationalist. For the past decade, Lawrence led the international programs of the Edison Electric Institute, and prior to EEI, He was Alston Grid's Vice President for North America for Utility Innovation and Infrastructure Resilience. So infrastructure is also part of Lawrence's DNA. And very importantly and impressively, Lawrence recently was inducted into the prestigious Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. Lawrence, let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Energy Plexus Institute that you have just co-founded and what it means, how you chose the name? What's your plan?
First of all, Clint, thanks for having me, and thanks, Christine, for your kind introduction, your kind words. The Energy Plexus Institute stems from the scientific consideration that energy is universal, is the link that ties all physical processes, is the link that is sort of the powerful compass that allows us to do long-term strategy as well as think about the human well-being of society. And the physical foundation, but also can be a constraint for socioeconomic growth. And so in that context, the Energy Plexus Institute really came about after numerous conversations with utility CEOs and other industry leaders around the world who said there was a need to foster greater understanding of the cross-sectoral aspects of energy and other infrastructure. They needed a platform to convene leaders from across various infrastructure you mentioned, Clint, to really understand the issues around the interdependency between various infrastructure, how it impacts broader electrification, how it impacts resilience, and some of the other critical issues that we see that's driving the whole energy debate today. The Energy Plexus Institute has been designed, will serve as a global platform for just that, really trying to improve the state of the energy debate, thinking about electricity, of course, at the center of this discussion, but also looking at the vital role it plays in industrialization, health, economic development, what have you. So that's in essence what the whole idea of the Energy Plexus Institute is. The vision of the Institute is electricity for everyone, everywhere. We can certainly talk about that later on. With a mission, as clear from the conversations with utility CEOs around the world and other infrastructure leaders, that it will aim to really accelerate universal access to, reliable, affordable, resilient energy, but doing it in a way that weaves together the industries, governments, and communities into this empowered web for collaboration, for sharing, and for innovation.
Who is helping you to co-found the Energy Plexus Institute, and what can you tell us about your future membership?
So I think the founding of the organization, I think in the terms of the question, I think it starts first of, I would say, the utility industry around the world. The CEOs and leaders I've met for the last decade have definitely demonstrated an interest in wanting this organization, such an organization, to be put in place. I think in terms of co-founding, in life, sometimes you meet people without knowing why you've met them. But 3 years ago, I was fortunate while attending the World Economic Forum in Davos, I met a gentleman by the name of Marco Montefiore. He's based in Geneva. And Marco and I, basically, we come from different backgrounds. He is a commodities trader. He has that strong background, but we share the same vision. And so together with Marco and his background, we complement each other. That was a very strong incentive for me to really want to dabble into this. So Marco is another important person here. Obviously, the partnerships with other experts from other domains is very important. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't say perhaps the most important partner and collaborator both Marco and I have for this endeavor are our wives, our respective wives and our children, because what we're about to do, we know is going to be very demanding. It's going to require some time away from home, a lot of time away from home. And so I would say perhaps the most important partner and collaborators for this initiative are our wives and our kids, because without them having that support, we won't be able to do what we're doing. So basically, the utilities, very important, the energy leaders around the world, the broader ecosystem, and then obviously Marco with his complementary skills to mine coming together, we show we can make this work.
You'll be the president and CEO, and Marco will be the chairman. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so that's a very good question. So basically, I will be the president and not a CEO, because one of the things Marco and I discussed very clear was that there are three words that are going to define how we deliver value for members across the world. One is empowerment, the other one is growth, and the last one is the future. And so we've decided that Marco, being the chair, would also be the chief growth officer, because we believe that as we create value for members, the key here is that the value being created is going to allow them to inform their growth strategy. Why empowerment? We want to make sure that the resources, the activities, the initiatives, whatever we do, is empowering the members, the CEOs and boards and others to make decisions that will drive the organization forward. And then why future? Future because obviously infrastructure, as you all know, Clint, is built for the long term. And so we want to make sure that the members are given the right strategic foresight to allow them to build infrastructure that's ready for the future, not necessarily for today. And so in that context, I will play the role as the chief empowerment and growth, chief empowerment and futures officer. And the reason why we did that, because we wanted to make sure that our roles and our responsibilities reflected the values that we'll be generating for the members. So I will play the role as president and chief empowerment and futures officer, and Marco will play the role as chair and chief growth officer, and working together with across the board with our members and the various stakeholders to make this organization successful.
When you mentioned a moment ago that you deeply valued the contribution of your wives and your children. When you explained your concept to them, how did you do it in a way that a non-engineering PhD was able to understand?
That's a good question. Well, let's put this. I don't think I've done a good job yet with the kids. I think I still have ways to go with the kids in explaining why the word plexus, the Energy Plexus Institute. But I think my wife, and Marco did the same with his wife, I think they get it, that we live in an interdependent world, right? Everything is tied together. And so whether we're talking about the need for energy, you need energy for food, you need energy for transportation, you need energy for health, you need energy for everything. And so I think explaining it is that think of the world as an interdependent set of systems that have to work together. And we cannot operate in silos. So even though I may want to be focused on the health sector, I know that the health sector needs energy. If you take today, Clint, talk about the idea of artificial intelligence and data center, which is driving growth in the United States, for example, there you need to think about the intersection between water, energy, and technology. Whereas if you say you're in India, where extreme heat is a big issue, well, you need to think about water, you need to think about cooling, and you need to think about energy. And so I think by talking about the Energy Plexus Institute in the context of why interdependency is important, I think I did a good job in convincing my wife why the name Plexus, and I think she got it. I still have some more work to do with the kids, because sometimes with kids you have to break things down a little further for them to grasp it. I think Marco had the same experience with his wife.
Thank you, Lawrence. When you focus on the interdependence of different sectors that interact with energy, what would be examples of some of the members that you're seeking to attract?
I mean, if you think about it, let's start with the electricity industry, right? The electricity utilities, I would call it, they are the linchpin for society going forward. So they are very, very important, right? So we've had conversations with a lot of utility CEOs and executives around the world, and many of them have been very, very supportive and have shown huge interest in this organization. I should say, for example, one of them who's going to play a very important role is the CEO of Iberdrola Group, Pedro Azagra. Pedro has agreed to serve as the chair of the August Global, Utility Executive Advisory Board, which we can certainly talk about later on. I think the other group we're looking at is making sure what we call the Nexus members. And these are not necessarily energy companies or utilities, but these would be companies in other sectors. So you think of the water sector, for example. You have a lot of companies in the water sector. You have the food sector. People don't realize how much electricity and energy is required to produce food, transportation. And so we're taking a sort of an ecosystem view when it comes to the Nexus members. But for all of this to work, Clint, we know that infrastructure requires capital, it requires financing. And so to make sure the table have everyone sitting around it, we also will be looking at what we call capital members. And these will be, investors and others, including insurance companies who play a very vital role for the infrastructure to be secured. And then obviously for all of this to work, you need what we call the enablers. And these are the technology companies who provide the technology that will be used for the infrastructure. We do have another interesting category, Clint, and we did that because when we think of the energy infrastructure, or we think of the ecosystem around energy and other infrastructures, let's not forget that research and thought leadership is extremely important. And so leading think tanks and leading research institutions, we're calling them our knowledge affiliates. So that will be sort of the ecosystem of members that will be targeting to become parts of the Energy Plexus Institute. But honestly, I mean, we were beginning with the electric utility companies, many of whom have already indicated their desire to be part of this, and we will be rolling out the names of the Global Utility Executive Advisory Board in March when we start to fully sort of get things up and running.
Well, you're off to a great start. It's hard to imagine a more prestigious foundational member than Pedro and Iberdrola. So we will be excited to see how this develops. In what countries and regions of the world are you planning to establish yourself?
So this was something that the members or the utilities we've been talking to have been very, very clear on, that because activities around electricity, around energy, around infrastructure is being done all over the world. And so having that global footprint is going to be very important. In terms of where, I think we've agreed, for obvious reasons, Marco being centered in Europe, we will have the headquarters of the Energy Plexus Institute in Geneva. But having said that, we will have global offices and representatives around the world, obviously in the US, in North America, in the GCC region, very important region, in Africa, in Asia. And so we will make sure that the global representation or the global location of our activities reflect the international structure of the Energy Plexus Institute. And so we'll be, spread across the world, but we'll do it in a much more careful, strategic way. We're not going to try to be everywhere at once, but we're going to do it in a much more sort of a structured manner based on the recommendations and the engagement from the members and the likes of the Utility Advisory Board, the Nexus Advisory Board, because at the end of the day, this is being done to make sure that the infrastructure operators and the utilities and the other infrastructure players have the right tools and resources to be able to make the decisions to build, future-ready infrastructure for decades to come.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your vision of really integrating the interdependence of different sectors that impact energy?
So this whole conversation around the interdependency is one that I have been toying with for a long time. And I say toying with because even as when I was working back with one of my previous roles, technology company, I was focused on this infrastructure issue because I think the interdependency is something that requires more focus. As we now see the world becoming even more interdependent, more interconnected, we need to begin to look at how do we mitigate the risk of cascading failures where one infrastructure goes down and everyone else goes down. And we see this clearly as we see increasing amounts of extreme weather events around the world. We see increasing kinds of attacks on different infrastructure. Understanding the interdependency in advance is just as critical as understanding everything about one sector. And so for us, I think what's important vision here is to make sure that not only are we proactively identifying the inherent risks that may be invisible to us because of these interdependencies, but that we are actually identifying the opportunities that we see there. And I give you a simple example. Take, for example, the water energy nexus. We know now, for example, in parts of Africa and maybe even Brazil and Latin America, because of drought, the lack of enough water is impacting the production of hydropower, and that has its own implications. We see in the context of the energy technological nexus, where now you need a lot of energy for serving data centers around the world. We think about it also food security, that understanding of how you need energy for transportation to get the food from point A to point B. One other aspect of the interdependency that we would love to see brought to bear is the notion around health. If you think of the hundreds of millions of people around the world who are having difficult time with getting health services, well, they need refrigeration for the medicine. They need energy for the refrigeration. And then, so you tie this all together, Clint, and you realize here that we need to really put a focus on understanding how these interdependencies, if we don't understand them carefully, can drive all kinds of risks to the corporations. And so this notion of de-risking investment in infrastructure has to be done by looking at the interdependencies between the different infrastructures. Take critical minerals, for example. I was talking to a couple of, earlier this year, I was at the Davos conference in Switzerland together, and Marco and I had a conversation with a series of infrastructure operators. And what was very clear was that if you don't think of the interdependency, that's a very important blind spot that could affect your operation. So it is no longer a sort of a theoretical issue. It's becoming a strategic asset to understand how is infrastructure A impacting my operations, how is infrastructure A and B combined impacting my operations. So our vision for the Energy Plexus Institute is not that we will only convene players from different sectors, Clint, but I will also create the opportunity for various interdependency tools to be used by them so that they can better identify risk and harness the opportunities by bringing these sectors through the same lens and designing them with a more holistic approach to it as opposed to doing it in silos.
Last month we did a roundtable with this think tank on the energy water nexus and focused on water scarcity. It was very sobering discussion because the policy development is way behind and the infrastructure development is way behind. When you look at cities like Cape Town in South Africa, many locations in the United States, when you look at the amount of energy and water that data centers need to continue to grow, it couldn't be a more timely focus for the Energy Plexus Institute.
If I may just add one comment before your next question, Clint, is I want to bring this back also to the notion of food security. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with one of the former heads of the World Food Program, and we're talking about the energy food nexus, but she brought something to my attention I hadn't thought about. And what she said was that in many parts of the world where people are now building large solar farms, which is great, but they have to also understand that those solar farms, if they are impacting the opportunity to grow food. And so now we have a new industry evolving where people are building solar farms, but then they're co-locating the solar farms with other agricultural products. Because again, land scarcity, resource scarcity, when you put it all together, you see the interdependency there. We need water for irrigation. We need land for crops. We need land for solar panels and so solar farms. And so how do we co-locate and co-optimize those things? And one of the things we were hoping to achieve with the Energy Plexus Institute is that companies do not have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, one of the CEOs we were talking to a few days ago said one of the beauties of why he is very keen on being part of the Energy Plexus Institute is because for him, one of the cost-effective ways to innovate is to learn what others are doing around the world and then adapt it to your current condition. And I thought that was a profound way of looking at the whole Energy Plexus Institute, is that we're allowing people to learn what's happening around the world in terms of interdependency and then adapt it to their specific situation.
Lawrence, what on the topic of interdependency, which is a word that is very meaningful to you and the Institute, what interdependency issue do you think is most vital right now or most urgent for the global economy to solve?
That's a very good question. We've been thinking about this from a very sort of I guess I would say from a global, but also from a local perspective, in the sense that we've noticed now that the interdependencies will vary from region to region, right? So we're just talking about the energy food security issue. So depending on where you are in the world, you will have to understand the local context in terms of the interdependencies. There's not, I don't think, and we don't believe there's a single interdependency for the entire world. I mean, there might be some big macro issues that affects the entire globe, issues like when we had the pandemic, some of these sort of a real macro level activities. But in terms of interdependency, it's going to vary from case to case. And so that is unique because that comes back to the regional aspect of the Energy Plexus Institute. What's important if you're, say, in Africa and you're a company or companies in Africa may be very different from the interdependencies you might consider, say, if you're in Asia or if you're in North America. So we will be looking at these interdependencies. They are global in scale in terms of talking about them, but they are local in context. And so there will be energy, water interdependency in one country. There could be energy, food, transportation in another country. And so we will have to really think global, but understand local in terms of how these things are going to be studied and the solutions we'll put forward for them.
Can you talk a little bit more, you just touched on it, about how geopolitics and geoeconomics factor into the Energy Plexus Institute's mission?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so vital. So when we started to think about this issue around the Energy Plexus Institute, one of the things we looked at were what were some of the macro level issues that were impacting infrastructure around the world. And so we started to think about them. And when we came up with a list of some of those macro level issues. So if you take, for example, critical minerals, which is important for energy in many countries, in fact, in almost in every country, has its own set of geopolitical implications that we need to understand. The same thing with geoeconomics, whether you talk about trade relationships around the world, how they will evolve. And so I think as we look at the Energy Plexus Institute, we want to make sure that we are tapping into a support network of world leaders, world experts on geopolitics, world experts on geoeconomics, and then bringing them around the table to help steer the thought leaderships of our members in terms of understanding how, because the world is global, because a lot of the stuff that's happening have global implications, we need to be able to, what I would call, do geopolitical forecasting and geoeconomic forecasting to see what's on the horizon. So if you took something like water, for example, right? While water may not necessarily be getting the same level of attention as it probably deserves, we already know, and you just said the webinar you had, Clint, we know that water is going to be a very serious resource constraint in the future. And so in terms of the geopolitics, if there are locations, places in the world where we know access to water creates bottlenecks for certain things, we need to start thinking about it, right? And I'm thinking here specifically, come back to mining sector, where we know the mining sector will need energy in some cases, where in most cases, it will need water. And so if there are issues around the geopolitics around water, you need to understand that as a CEO. The same thing when it comes to trade and international relations. And so we see the Energy Plexus Institute as convening not just people in the energy ecosystem, but even experts in other fields that could bring their thought leadership and knowledge to bear upon what we'll do as an institute.
In our private conversations, Lawrence, you frequently mention your concern about affordability, which has become a huge political issue in the United States and beyond. How does affordability factor into your mission?
It is essential. We talked about infrastructure, and we talked about the availability. We talked about making it resilient and all of the above. These are good attributes, but I think affordability is very important, and affordability can be viewed from an interdependency standpoint. Why it's important is because you can actually impact the affordability equation by looking at the drivers of affordability. And as I've traveled over the last 10 years, traveled around the world, and I will talk to utility CEOs and other industry leaders, what was clear was that sometimes it wasn't really obvious what was driving the affordability equation for a given country or given context of a given region. And what is becoming clear is that by looking at the interdependencies in terms of these different infrastructure, you may realize that the driver of an affordability issue may actually be what's happening in another sector, not necessarily happening in your own sector, right? And so if you take, for example, say the price of critical minerals, say the price of copper, for example, right? We know that copper is used significantly in the electricity industry and even also in data centers, right? So as the price of copper gets to change, well, that's going to drive what's going to happen in your deliverable as a utility or as a mining company, if you may, right? So we believe that affordability needs to be reframed in the context of not just looking at it from a one sector perspective, but let's take a much more holistic view or about affordability to understand the drivers of affordability. That's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect comes down to this issue of the affordability in terms of what happens if you can actually tackle the problem. Everyone wins, right? The infrastructure operators, they benefit if they have the right understanding of the drivers of affordability. The customers win, and society benefits, right? So I think by moving away from a siloed approach to trying to understand affordability, to making it a much more holistic, a much more interdependent view of affordability, it helps us to reframe and to better understand the drivers. Because today, Clint, look, I was traveling a couple of years ago in a country, not to be mentioned, and I asked the CEO in that country, I said, what is the reason that the electricity costs in your territory is going up? And he said, well, actually, I don't know, but I think it's because of the amount of water that we're using in how we run our units. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, I don't know. I guess we just have to wait and see. And I said, well, have you talked to the water utilities to maybe come up with an understanding? Because the water utility needs electricity. You need water. Maybe you guys can harness the interdependent nature of your businesses and come up with a deal that would benefit both water and electricity. And he said, oh, wow, Lawrence, good idea. So again, and this was maybe like 9 years ago. Even then I was already thinking about, like, why not think broad in terms of what's driving these discussions? And so that was it. Yeah.
Taking that great example into a practical format for the Energy Plexus Institute, what are some of the activities that you're planning over the next 12 months?
So as we are designing activities, there are two things. I go back to the three words I said, Clint, to begin with: empowerment, growth, and futures. And so whatever we're doing is going to be viewed through that lens as informed by our members. And so obviously, over the next couple of months, we're going to be fully operational by June 1st. The fiscal year of the Energy Plexus Institute is going to go from June 1st to May 31st. But we're not going to wait until June 1st to start creating value for our members. And so initially, you're going to see us doing a couple of regional roundtables, which is something that the members who have already expressed interest, but even new members will benefit from. So we're going to start doing some of those regional roundtables. We will also then start working with our partners, this support network we have of of different folks around the Nexus to start bringing different kinds of tools that the members can use, building upon what already exists. And then I think a couple of big things we know is going to happen over the next 12 months. In the fall of this year, we're going to be doing the Global Electrification Forum. It will be, again, that's going to be going forward, an event that will rotate around the world. So the next one in 2026 in the fall is going to be in Europe. It's going to be in the UK, where one of our founding members who have expressed interest to play host that for that event. And then in January of next year, we're going to be working together to host the Energy Leadership Forum, something that Marco started. He's had 2 versions of that. We'll be working on the 3rd version of the Energy Leadership Forum. That will be taking place in January of next year, the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. It's not going to be a World Economic Forum event, but it's going to be taking place in Davos nonetheless. So those are just some of the big things happening there. I think another point I would mention in terms of the initiatives, even though we're going to be driving these initiatives to empower, create value from a growth and from a future perspective, we still want the mission of Energy Plexus Institute, electricity for everyone, everywhere, means we believe that access to electricity, access to energy, requires also access to information. And so one of the things we will be doing is some of the initiatives we will be working on will be made available to the public. And we want the public to be part of this. And by public, I mean the entire world will be able to participate in some of these forums, to be able to listen and learn, because we don't believe that it's enough just to have a conversation with the infrastructure operators and investors and others. We want to have the entire world part of the ecosystem, because point I will make why this is important, and Marco is very big on this. He's written a book on energy citizenship. We need to educate the public about energy across the board, all aspects of it, all aspects of energy. And so educating them about the energy interdependency is also a very important part of educating the public. So we'll be doing some of these things as well, more forward, public facing, that the rest of the world can benefit from as well.
Lawrence, when we do our fireside chat a year from now to assess how you've done, what would be an example of the most important milestone landmark that you hope to achieve in that time frame?
So I like you, Clint, and I like the number 1, but I'm going to have to give you 2. I think the first important milestone for us is having met the expectation and deliver on the promises to the members in terms of what will empower them, what will allow them to grow, and what will allow them to be able to prepare for the future. And so having that, the right level of engagement, it's not so much how many members we have. It's going to be important to use that as a metric as well. But I think for us, the key success would be having the right level of engagement of the members. That's going to be very important. So if come 12 months from now, we have that happening, we'll be pleased. I think the other thing we're looking at is if we got to 12 months or 3 years from now, for that matter, and more organizations, more and more businesses, but even public sector are beginning to take a interdependent view of infrastructure, meaning if people start to embrace and integrate the Energy Plexus concept in their designs of their strategy going forward, where they're looking across infrastructure, they're not looking at just their silos, they're looking at multiple infrastructure. I think that will be a very, very important milestone for us to be able to say that, yes, the notion of thinking about interdependency is now becoming mainstream. And hopefully that will not only be good for the utilities and the energy companies and the ecosystem of the Nexus members, but it will also be good for society. And so long term, who knows? Maybe even public policy making, which is something you're very good at, would also begin to embrace the notion of designing public policy that cuts across multiple industries and multiple infrastructures.
In addition to these broad strategies, will you be providing your members with practical toolkits that they can use to advance their own needs in each region. And you've pointed out differences among the regions.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very important. So one of the words that have been coming up a lot as we talk to utility CEOs, and when Marcos and I were in Davos in January, that came up a lot, not sometimes indirectly, was pragmatism. And pragmatism meaning we're not going to only think future and have things that will perhaps help us to plan for the future, but we need to have things that are actionable insights today. And one of the ways to generate those actionable insights, in addition to convening, is to also create the right, we call them interdependency tool sets. And so we will be working with partners. There are a lot of companies around the world who have done excellent work with tools and technology that could be used by our members. So we'll be kind of like the the repository of these various tools. We may not be developing them ourselves, but we will partner with people who can, through our network and through our platform, make those available to our members. So that's going to be important. In addition to that, we'll also be developing interdependency frameworks where the members could use them in their own design of their strategic plan. And so we will be doing a mixture of using technology as well as using basic human thought leadership to help us create the right set of tools and the right set of platforms for our members. The thing that's going to be so interesting as we have developed the Energy Plexus Institute is the support network that I talked about, right? So in addition to having our, the utility members, we have the Nexus members, which are companies from different fields. We have these advisory groups, right? I already talked about the Global Utility Executive Advisory Board, which is going to be chaired by Pedro Azagra of Iberdrola. We're going to have a Nexus Advisory Board. But then we're going to have our Nexus Fellows. And these will be experts, leading experts, well-renowned, from other sectors who will be bringing their thought leadership to the Energy Plexus Institute. And so you can imagine a round table discussing one topic, but there will be multiple viewpoints, someone from the water sector, maybe someone who's involved in demography, maybe you have someone who's very deep in terms of the brain economy, understanding how the brain works. We believe that we need to be able to put forward not just tools that solve one set of problems, but tools that allow you to study the cross-sectorial impacts of these different systems. So yeah, that's something we're going to be very, very much focused on. But again, pragmatism is going to be the key word to make sure that we're doing things that the members actually can use immediately and not just wait, for sort of a long term.
I remember your discussion at at Denton's last Energy Summit, where you talked about brain development in a way that linked it with energy. I think it probably received the highest rating of all of the speakers at our summit, and we had a great group of people from all different areas of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you're continuing that theme. And on the subject of brain power, I want to switch gears in the remaining minutes that we have. And you've been living an interesting life, but I think you outdid yourself in Davos recently, where you interviewed the Nobel laureate for economics in 2025. Can you tell us a little bit about that interview? What were some of the highlights of it, and how that might impact some of your future work with the Energy Plexus Institute?
So I'll be happy to. So the 2025 Nobel laureate in economic science went to three individuals. One of them was Professor Philippe Agnon at the Annecy University in France. Philippe specialty has been around this whole idea of growth, specifically looking at this notion of creative destruction in the vein of Schumpeter. Many of those who are economists may know the name of that, about this whole issue of competition and growth. And so about 4 years ago, before he got the Nobel Prize, I bought his book. It was called The Power of Creative Destruction, a very dense book in terms of the content, very, very mathematical, but I got through it. And at the end of reading the book, I said to my team, why don't we invite, Professor Agnon to be a guest on a platform I started called Influential Minds, where we bring, global thought leaders to sit down and have a dialogue. And Philippe agreed, and he came. And actually, during the first interview with him back then, he was surprised that someone actually had read his book, because it's a very, very interesting field. It's a very interesting topic. It speaks to how innovation is dispersed around the world, but what are some of the inhibitors to innovation? And what happens sometimes when you don't have the right policies in place to let innovation take off, and the importance of constant regenerating new ideas. And so I did an interview with Philippe, and we became, friends. I've known him for those years. And so last October, I got the call that Philippe Agnon is getting the Nobel Prize, and he's getting it for his work on creative destruction, which was amazing because, had I interviewed someone 4 years prior who now is getting the Nobel Prize for something that many people thought I was crazy about focusing on. So that was a little positive energy there. So I reached out to Philippe because Marco had invited me to come to the Energy Leadership Forum in Davos. And so I invited Philippe and I said, would you like us to sit down for a live session of Influential Minds at Davos? And he said, absolutely, Lawrence, which was, blew my mind. I mean, he just got the Nobel Prize. He has more important things to do. But he was very humble. In fact, I sent the email to the request to Philippe around just before New Year's Eve, I guess. And the next day I got a reply. So he just said, I'll do it. And I think for him, it was one of those things where, because I had shown interest in his work even before he got the Nobel Prize, it showed him that I truly believe in what he was doing. So we met and he came to Davos. It was a very enlightening interview. If anyone hasn't seen it, I'm happy to have them take a look at it. I think the key message Philip was driving home is that given where the world is, we need to harness the power of creative destruction, meaning we need to realize that at times we need smaller firms, innovation to come and sort of disrupt the status quo, not necessarily in a negative way, but do it in a way that more progress is made. And so Philippe's key message was even infrastructure sectors like energy, like transportation, they should all be beneficiaries of creative destruction because change is very important. I think one of the most profound things Philippe said was his having an aversion to poverty. He said he doesn't like poverty. He hated poverty. Or he didn't use the word hate, but he said he had a negative sensitivity about poverty. He didn't like it. And for that reason, he felt that, around the world, more needs to be done to make sure that the prosperity that has been generated from creative destruction can be shared across the world so that everyone benefits from it. Another key message was his comment he made about competition, where we talked about AI, where he said, basically, today we may have a handful of large organizations that are sort of driving the AI chain, if you may, the AI wave. But he said he's concerned that we should allow other players more to get involved, so that we have a plurality of players to make sure that innovation keeps going forward. So it was a wide-ranging conversation. One other thing he said, which I will share with the audience, I had done some research, and it turned out that Philippe loves to wash dishes. So it's his hobby. He likes washing the dishes. And I said, why? And he said some of his best ideas comes from the therapeutic nature of washing dishes. And so he washes dishes a lot. And so for those listening, if you need some good ideas, maybe it's not a bad idea to wash dishes. I can reveal to you, Clint, and I think I've told you, my thing has been folding clothes. I love to fold clothes. I love to do laundry because it's the only time I get to do something that doesn't require me to think too much, except when you're folding the clothes. So anyway, I just wanted to put that in there because I think Philippe was very keen on the importance of creative destruction. The key messages came across. But I was really honored to have a room of 100+ people at the Energy Leadership Forum and to interview a Nobel laureate in front of the world like that. That was definitely the highlight of my interview skills, if you may.
Well, Lawrence, you've always been ahead of the herd in everything that you've done. And I really look forward to watching you and Marco and Pedro and the Energy Plexus Institute really soar. And I look forward to our fireside chat a year from now when you can go through the key performance indicators and explain to me how you've exceeded all of your own expectations.
If I may, before we end, I just want to say that we're truly, I talked to Marco about this a few days ago, we're truly humbled that Denton would invite us to this global platform to allow us to begin to softly roll out the Energy Plexus Institute, softly because this is our first public conversation about this initiative. And so we were very honored to do it, given all the work you're doing in this field yourself, Clint. We also want to express thanks to the Keystone Policy Center, Christine and her team for the work they will be doing going forward. We're very, very, very inspired and encouraged by the response we're getting from around the world, from the utilities, from the Nexus companies, if you may, and clearly, the participation of Pedro Azagra is really one that we are very honored about. But again, in March, we're going to be rolling out and announcing the other members of the advisory board and other players within the Energy Plexus Institute. So really thanks to you. I would like to end, if we're about to end, I just have to say, coming back to partnership, and Mark and I think about this all the time, is that without the support of our spouses and of our kids, I don't think we'll be able to do what we're about to do, because already we're spending a lot of time with CEOs around the world who are not asking us to move slow, they're asking us to move fast. And so we're thankful to our family, our spouses, and the kids for bearing with us. It's going to be a little rocky road for the next 12 months, but once the Institute is up and running, we will hopefully be able to stay home more often and spend time with the kids and the wife.
Well, you're a great father and spouse. I think if you continue to do the dishes and fold the laundry also, you'll be in great shape. But what a wonderful interview, Lawrence. I wish you the very, very best. And we look forward to seeing you develop what is a phenomenal vision for the Energy Plexus Institute. So all the best. On behalf of the audience, I'm going to give you an ovation and express our deep appreciation for you being with us today.
Thank you, Clint, and wish you a good rest of the year. Enjoy your Mardi Gras celebration as well.
Thank you, and let me wish everyone a great remainder of today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.